This is one of those things I never thought I'd write, but here I am. My wife, Sarah, and I have been together for almost a decade, married for 5 years. We live in a cozy house in the suburbs. No kids yet, but we've been talking about it for a while now. On the surface, everything looked fine, good jobs, good friends, and a relationship I thought was strong. But now I'm questioning everything. About 6 months ago, Sarah started acting different. At first, it was subtle. She'd take her phone with her everywhere, even to the bathroom, which she never used to do. When I asked her about it, she said she just liked having her phone close. Fine. But then, she started going out more. Girls' night became a regular thing, even though she's never been the type to go out all the time. I didn't mind at first. I wanted her to have her space, to enjoy herself. But something fell off. One Saturday night, things really started to fall apart. She told me she was going out with some friends as usual, and I didn't think too much of it. But she spent an hour getting ready, more than usual. She put on this tight black dress I'd never seen before, did her makeup to the nines, and wore high heels. She looked amazing, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't her typical girls' night out look. My gut told me something wasn't right, but I didn't want to accuse her without proof. When she kissed me goodbye, it felt distant, like her mind was somewhere else. She left around 7 p.m. and I tried to distract myself with a movie, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. By 10 p.m., I still hadn't heard from her, which wasn't like her at all. Normally, she'd at least send a text to let me know she was having fun or when she'd be home. I texted her, just asking how things were going. No reply. An hour later, I tried calling, but it went straight to voicemail. That's when the knot in my stomach tightened. Now, I'm not the jealous type. I've always trusted her, but that night, something broke inside me. I opened up the tracking app on our phones. It's something we both use, mostly for safety, and she knows I have access to her location. When I checked, she wasn't at the bar downtown like she said she'd be. Instead, her pin was across town in a neighborhood I didn't recognize. My mind was racing. Was she lying? Maybe her friends went somewhere else. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but that uneasy feeling wouldn't go away. I stared at that map, watching the pin sit there for almost an hour. Finally, I made a decision that I'm still not sure I'm proud of. I got in my car. It took me about 20 minutes to get there. The whole drive I was trying to rationalize it. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe they'd gone to a friend's house, and she just forgot to tell me. But as I pulled into the neighborhood, my stomach dropped. It was a quiet street, no bars or restaurants nearby, just rows of houses. I parked a little down the road and looked at the address the app was showing. A nice 2-story house with all the lights off, except for one room upstairs. My heart was pounding. I sat there for what felt like forever, staring at the house, trying to convince myself to leave. But then I saw her, Sarah, coming out the front door laughing, with a guy I'd never seen before. He was tall, well-dressed, and had his arm around her waist like it belonged there. They walked to his car, and when they kissed before getting in, my world shattered. I don't know how long I sat there frozen. It felt like time had stopped, and I was outside of my own body, watching it all happen. The logical part of me wanted to confront them right then and there, but I couldn't move. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. I watched as they got into his car and drove off, my wife sitting there in the passenger seat, smiling like she didn't have a care in the world. I didn't follow them. Something inside me just broke. I couldn't bring myself to chase after them. Instead, I drove home, my mind in a fog. Everything was spinning. How could she do this? Was I not enough? Had I been blind this whole time? By the time I got home, I felt numb. I didn't want to believe what I had just seen. I sat on the couch for hours, just staring at the wall, waiting for her to come home. It was past midnight when she finally walked through the door. She was smiling, her hair slightly messed up, and her lipstick smudged. "Hey, babe," she said casually, like nothing was wrong, like she hadn't just shattered my world. "Did you have fun?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She nodded, kicking off her heels. "Yeah, just the usual girls' night. We stayed out a little later than planned. Sorry about that." She walked over and kissed me on the forehead, like everything was normal. It took everything in me not to confront her right then and there. But instead I played along. I asked about her night, let her tell her little lies about where they'd gone, what they did. I watched her lie to my face, and it was like I was seeing a stranger. This wasn't the woman I married. The Sarah I knew would never cheat, would never lie like this. But here she was, acting like nothing had happened. She went to bed not long after that, and I just sat there, still in shock. I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the kiss in my head, over and over again. I thought about waking her up, demanding answers, but I knew it would just turn into a fight. She'd probably deny it, make up some excuse. And I wasn't ready to hear her lie again. The next morning, I pretended everything was fine. I couldn't confront her yet. I needed more than just what I saw. I needed proof. Something she couldn't deny. So, I started paying attention. I watched her closely over the next few days. She was still on her phone constantly, texting and smiling at messages she wouldn't show me. She'd tell me she was working late, but I knew better now. Then, a few days later, I got my chance. She left her phone on the counter when she went to take a shower. Normally, she'd take it with her, but this time she forgot. My heart was racing as I picked it up. I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to be the guy who snoops through his wife's phone, but I needed the truth. And there it was. Text from a guy named Matt. I didn't recognize the number, but the messages were clear. They had been meeting up for months, sneaking around behind my back. They were talking about the next time they could be together, and I felt sick. There were photos too, her with him, smiling, holding hands, looking so happy. That's when it hit me. This wasn't some one-time fling. This was an affair. Now, I'm not the jealous type. I've always trusted Sarah. But that night, something inside me cracked. I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling gnawing at me. So I did something I'd never done before. I opened up the tracking app on our phones. It's a safety thing we both agreed on a while back. Something we'd use if one of us ever got lost or in trouble. Sarah knows I have access to it, but it felt wrong to check her location. It was like I was crossing some line, but I told myself it was just to make sure she was okay. When the map loaded, my heart nearly stopped. Sarah wasn't at the bar downtown like she said she'd be. Instead, her location was showing up in a quiet residential neighborhood on the other side of town, a place I didn't recognize. There were no bars or restaurants there, no reason I could think of for her to be in that area. Panic started bubbling up inside me. Why would she lie about where she was? What could she be doing? I sat there, staring at her pin on the map, trying to convince myself there was a reasonable explanation. Maybe her friends decided to crash at someone's house, or maybe her phone just glitched and was showing the wrong location. But as the minutes ticked by and her location didn't change, I couldn't ignore that sick feeling in my gut. Something was definitely wrong. I watched the clock for nearly an hour, hoping she'd text me back or the location would move, but nothing happened. Finally, I made a decision that felt like it was out of my hands. I grabbed my car keys and left the house. The whole drive over, I kept telling myself I was overreacting, that I'd get there and find some perfectly innocent explanation. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. It took me about 20 minutes to get to the neighborhood. As I drove down the street, my heart sank. The houses were big, quiet, the kind of place where people settle down, not where you go for a wild night out. I parked a little down the road from where Sarah's pin was showing, just far enough not to be seen, and tried to steady my breathing. My palms were sweaty as I gripped the steering wheel, staring at the house in front of me. The lights were off, except for one upstairs window glowing faintly. I sat there, frozen, my mind racing. Should I just leave? Should I knock on the door? My heart was pounding in my chest, and every second that passed felt like an eternity. Then, before I could even think about what to do next, the front door of the house opened. And there she was, Sarah, walking out with a man. She stepped out laughing, her arm linked around this guy as if they were more than just friends. He was tall, dressed sharply in a crisp white shirt and dark jeans, like he knew exactly how to present himself. I could see the way they moved together, It wasn't the kind of casual body language you'd have with a friend. It was intimate, natural, like they had done this 1,000 times before. My heart felt like it had stopped. This wasn't happening. I kept hoping that maybe it wasn't what it looked like, that there could be some other explanation. Maybe it was just a friendly goodbye. Maybe this was all a misunderstanding. But as they walked toward his car, I saw the way he leaned in, cupped her face, and kissed her deeply, like they didn't have a care in the world. And Sarah, my wife, she kissed him back. It wasn't a hesitant or awkward kiss either. It was comfortable, confident, like she'd done it many times before. That's when it hit me, like a punch to the gut. This wasn't some random fling or spur-of-the-moment mistake. This had been going on, and from the way she was with him, it had been going on for a while. My hands started to shake as I watched them. I felt like the world was spinning out of control, and I couldn't catch my breath. I didn't know what to do. Should I get out of the car and confront them? Should I follow them to see where they were going? Part of me wanted to scream, to demand answers right then and there. But I couldn't move. My body just refused to cooperate. I was frozen, paralyzed by the sight of my wife with another man. As they got into his car, I thought about jumping out, running up to them, and yelling at the top of my lungs. I pictured myself pulling him out of the driver's seat and demanding to know what the hell was going on. But as they pulled away, reality hit me. I had no plan. No idea what I'd even say. My mind was racing with 1,000 thoughts, none of them making any sense. Instead, I stayed there, sitting in my car, watching the taillights fade into the distance. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight I thought I might break it. I was angry, devastated, and confused all at once. How could this happen? How long had this been going on? What had I missed? And more than anything, why hadn't she said anything to me? I sat there for what felt like hours, but it was probably only a few minutes. I didn't know what to do next. Part of me wanted to go home, pretend I hadn't seen anything, and wait for her to come back with her usual lies. The other part of me wanted to keep following her, to find out where they were going and catch her in the act again. Maybe then I'd finally know the truth. But in the end, I couldn't bring myself to do either. Instead, I just sat there in the darkness, trying to make sense of what I had just witnessed. Eventually, I drove home, my mind completely blank. I don't even remember the drive. I just remember pulling into our driveway, staring at the front door for what felt like an eternity. Everything looked so normal, like nothing had changed, but I knew better now. The house, the life we'd built together, it all felt like a lie. I walked inside, and the silence hit me hard. It was almost unbearable. I stood in the kitchen for a while, trying to figure out what to do next. My phone buzzed. It was Sarah. She'd finally texted me back, hours later, acting like nothing was wrong. "Sorry, babe. Got caught up with the girls. Be home soon. Love you." I stared at the screen, her words feeling like a slap in the face. Love you? How could she even say that after what I'd just seen? I wanted to scream, throw my phone against the wall, something to release the rage building up inside me. But instead, I just sat down at the kitchen table, the weight of everything crashing down on me. I didn't reply. I couldn't. What was I supposed to say? I had all these questions running through my head. Was I not enough for her? How long had she been seeing this guy? Did our entire marriage mean nothing to her? A few hours later, Sarah came home. I heard her keys jingle at the door, and my heart started racing. She walked in all smiles, like everything was normal. "Hey, babe," she said, leaning in to kiss me on the cheek. I couldn't move. I couldn't even look at her. All I could see was her with that guy, kissing him like she had no other worries in the world. "You okay?" she asked, sounding concerned. "You've been really quiet tonight." I wanted to tell her I knew. I wanted to scream at her, demand answers, ask her why she would do this to me. But I couldn't. Not yet. Instead, I just nodded, forcing myself to say, "Yeah, just tired." She didn't push. She probably didn't even notice that I was breaking inside. She went upstairs to take a shower, and I sat there, staring at the table, wondering how long I could keep pretending like I didn't know. As I sat at the table, Listening to the sound of the shower running upstairs, my mind raced with a million thoughts. I felt trapped. I was furious, hurt, confused, but at the same time I didn't want to believe it. Part of me was hoping that this was all just some horrible misunderstanding, that I had jumped to conclusions too fast. I started going over every moment of the past few months in my head, trying to figure out when things had changed. Had I missed the signs? Had she been unhappy this whole time? I thought back to the little things. The extra time she spent getting ready, the sudden increase in girls' nights, the way she kept her phone close to her all the time. It was all starting to make sense, but that didn't make it any easier to accept. When she came back downstairs, freshly showered, she was still smiling, as if nothing had happened. She curled up on the couch with me, acting like we were just a normal couple winding down after a long day. I could barely breathe. How could she act like everything was fine after what she'd just done? I wanted to pull away from her, but I didn't. I just sat there, numb, letting her lean into me like everything was still okay between us. "You seem really off tonight," she said softly, looking up at me. "Are you sure you're okay?" I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't sit there and act like everything was fine, but I still didn't know how to confront her. What was I supposed to say? That I'd followed her? That I'd seen her with another man? I needed more than just my gut feeling and what I saw from the car. I needed proof, something she couldn't deny. So instead of confronting her, I lied. "Yeah, just tired from work. I think I'll head to bed early." She seemed satisfied with that answer, probably relieved that I wasn't pushing her on where she'd been. She kissed me on the cheek, completely oblivious to the storm of emotions raging inside me, and told me she'd be up soon. I nodded and went upstairs, my mind already spinning with what I needed to do next. I knew I couldn't go on like this, pretending I didn't know. I needed to find out exactly how deep this went. So that night, while she was still downstairs, I made a decision. I was going to get to the bottom of this, no matter what it took. I grabbed her phone from the charger while she was distracted, hoping for a quick opportunity to find something, anything, that would confirm what I already suspected. With her phone in my hand, I felt a wave of guilt wash over me, but I pushed it aside. I needed answers. This wasn't about privacy anymore. This was about figuring out if my marriage was a lie. I sat down on the bed, my hands shaking as I unlocked her phone. Luckily, I knew her passcode. She had never hidden that from me, and it stung even more that she was so casual about it. I opened her messages first, hoping to find something that would explain all of this. At first, there was nothing out of the ordinary, just chats with her friends, her mom, a few work-related conversations. But then I scrolled a bit further and saw a message thread with someone named Matt. My heart pounded in my chest as I opened it. The texts weren't long or romantic at first glance. They seemed casual, but I could feel the undertone in them. There were a few too many smiley faces, a few too many "can't wait to see you" messages that didn't add up with her stories of girls' nights. As I scrolled further, I found the confirmation I was dreading. "Last night was amazing. Can't stop thinking about you." Her reply came right after, and it crushed me. "You were incredible as always. I miss you already." I felt sick. There was no more denying it. This wasn't just a fling. This was something that had been going on for a while. She was comfortable with him, with their little secret. The more I read, the more I realized just how deep this ran. They'd been meeting up for months, sneaking around while I was at work or out with friends. There were details about places they'd been together, lies she'd told me to cover her tracks. And then there were the pictures. I couldn't bring myself to open them at first, but I had to know. There she was, smiling with him, wrapped in his arms, like they belonged together. The way she looked at him in those photos, it was like she wasn't the same woman I'd married. She looked happy, happier than I'd seen her in a long time. I sat there, staring at the phone, feeling like the ground had fallen out from under me. My heart was pounding, my stomach was in knots. I didn't know whether to scream, cry, or both. This wasn't just about the physical betrayal, it was about everything. The lies, the sneaking around, the fact that she had chosen him over me again and again. I heard Sarah coming up the stairs, so I quickly put the phone back on the charger and lay down, pretending to be asleep. I didn't know how I was going to confront her yet, but I knew I had to do something. I couldn't keep living like this. But for now, I needed time to process what I had just uncovered. The next morning was unbearable. Sarah acted like everything was perfectly normal. She kissed me goodbye before heading off to work, leaving me standing there, feeling like I was drowning in my own thoughts. I kept replaying those messages and pictures in my head. The way she looked at him, the way she had lied to me without even flinching. I couldn't believe this was my life now. I spent the entire day in a haze, trying to focus on anything but the truth I had uncovered. I couldn't eat, I couldn't think straight. Every time my phone buzzed, I flinched, half expecting it to be another message from Matt popping up on Sarah's screen by mistake. By the time evening rolled around, I knew I couldn't keep pretending. Something had to give, but I still wasn't ready for a confrontation. I didn't want to go into it without more proof, more understanding of how long this had been going on, more clarity about what she really felt for him. So, I decided to take things a step further. I installed a tracking app on her phone, one that would give me access to her messages and calls without her knowing. I hated myself for doing it, but I needed the truth. I had tried to trust her. I had tried to believe in our marriage, but now, after what I'd seen, I couldn't afford to be in the dark anymore. Over the next few days, I watched. I didn't say anything to her, didn't confront her, didn't let on that I knew. Instead, I monitored her conversations, her location, and every move she made. It was exhausting, waiting for the next clue, the next lie to surface. But I needed to be sure before I took any action. And sure enough, there it was. Another girls' night was planned for the weekend. But this time, I knew the truth. Through the tracking app, I saw the texts between Sarah and Matt, setting up their next rendezvous at his place. They talked like this was routine for them, like they had a system. She'd tell me she was out with friends, but really, she'd be with him. The rage that had been simmering inside me finally reached a boiling point. I couldn't sit on this any longer. The lies, the betrayal, it was too much to bear. I knew where she'd be, and this time I was going to confront her. I was done waiting for explanations. Saturday finally came, and I could barely keep my emotions in check. Sarah was getting ready, the same way she always did for these girls' nights, a little too much effort for a casual hangout. She put on a dress that clung to her in all the right places, fixed her hair, and applied more makeup than she normally wore. I watched her silently, feeling the familiar knot tighten in my stomach. I knew where she was going. I knew who she was going to be with. And tonight I wasn't just going to sit by and let it happen. She kissed me goodbye, her smile bright and carefree, like she wasn't about to walk out on everything we had built. I wanted to scream at her right then and there, but I held back. I had a plan. I had to see this through. Once she left, I waited a few minutes before getting into my car. I pulled up the tracking app on my phone and watched her location in real time, making sure I had the address of where she was headed. Sure enough, her pin wasn't anywhere near the bar she had said she was meeting her friends at. It was across town, right at Matt's place, just like they'd planned. I drove over, my heart pounding in my chest the whole way. The closer I got, the more I could feel the anger boiling inside me. This wasn't just some fling. She had been living a double life, lying to my face while she ran off with another man. I didn't know what I was going to do when I got there. Confront her? Him? Both. All I knew was that I needed to face the truth, even if it tore everything apart. When I arrived, I parked down the street, far enough away that I wouldn't be noticed. I could see her car parked in the driveway, right next to Matt's. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. This was it. There was no turning back now. I got out of the car and started walking toward the house, my legs feeling like they were made of lead. Every step felt heavier than the last. As I got closer, I could hear faint laughter coming from inside. My stomach churned. This was really happening. She was in there with him right now, probably laughing about all the lies she told me to cover her tracks. I stood at the front door, frozen for a moment, listening to the sounds of their voices through the walls. My hand hovered over the doorbell, my heart racing. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. And then I rang the bell. The moment I pressed the doorbell, it felt like time slowed down. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out, and my hands were shaking uncontrollably. Inside, I could hear movement, footsteps approaching the door. This was it. I was about to come face to face with the man who had been sleeping with my wife, and with Sarah, who had lied to me over and over again. The door opened, and there he stood, Matt. He looked surprised, but not as panicked as I'd imagined he would. He was tall, confident, dressed casually like he wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary. For a second he just stared at me, clearly trying to figure out who I was. Then it hit him. His expression changed from confusion to something like guilt, but he didn't say a word. I could see past him into the house, and there she was, Sarah. She was standing in the living room, holding a glass of wine, her face draining of color the moment she saw me. Her eyes widened, and she dropped the glass, the sound of it shattering on the floor, breaking the silence. "Jason, what are you doing here?" she stammered, taking a step back. I could see the panic in her eyes, the realization that there was no more hiding, no more pretending. I didn't answer her right away. I was too focused on the fact that this was real, that the woman I had built my life with was standing in another man's house, caught red-handed. My whole body was trembling with anger and disbelief. I turned my attention back to Matt, who still hadn't said a word, just standing there like he was waiting for me to make the first move. "I think you know what I'm doing here," I finally said, my voice shaking. "How long has this been going on?" Neither of them spoke. Sarah looked like she wanted to disappear, and Matt just stood there, jaw clenched, not meeting my eyes. "Answer me," I shouted, the rage finally breaking through. "How long?" Sarah flinched at the sound of my voice, her hands trembling. It's not what it looks like," she stuttered, but the words sounded weak, like even she didn't believe them. I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it. "Not what it looks like. Really, Sarah? Then why are you here? Why have you been lying to me for months?" Matt finally spoke, his voice calm, too calm for the situation. "Look, man, I think you should leave." That sentence sent me over the edge. Leave? I was the one who had been betrayed, the one whose life had been turned upside down, and this guy had the audacity to tell me to leave? I took a step toward him, fists clenched, my blood boiling. "Who the hell do you think you are?" I spat. "You're sleeping with my wife, and you think you can just brush me off?" Sarah stepped forward, tears welling up in her eyes. "Jason, please. Just calm down. We can talk about this." "Talk?" I snapped. "What is there to talk about? You've been cheating on me, lying to my face, and you want to talk?" I was shaking, my voice barely holding together. "How long, Sarah? Just tell me the truth for once." She hesitated, looking down at the floor as if she could find an excuse there. Then she whispered, barely audible, "It's been 6 months." 6 months. Half a year of lies. My entire body went numb as the weight of those words hit me. It was worse than I thought. 6 months. I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. 6 months of lies sneaking around and pretending everything was normal. Half a year of her betraying me behind my back. I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened as the reality of it all crashed over me, and I just stood there, speechless, trying to wrap my head around the fact that my entire marriage had been a lie for so long. Sarah was crying now, her hands trembling as she reached out to me. "Jason, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I never wanted to hurt you." I stepped back, out of her reach. Her words meant nothing. How could she even say that? How could she look me in the eye and try to claim she didn't mean to hurt me when she'd been with him for months? I couldn't believe she was trying to turn this into some kind of misunderstanding, like it was a mistake she just happened to fall into. "You didn't mean to hurt me?" I repeated, my voice hollow. "You've been lying to me for half a year, Sarah. Do you even realize what you've done? Or are you just sorry you got caught?" She looked down, wiping her eyes, but I didn't care about her tears anymore. This wasn't about her guilt or regret. This was about the fact that she had shattered my trust, ripped apart everything we had built, and then had the nerve to stand there and act like she was the victim. Matt shifted uncomfortably, clearly wanting to be anywhere but there. He finally spoke again, his voice calm but firm. "Jason, look, I know you're upset, but this isn't going to help anything. Let's just talk like adults." I couldn't believe it. He was trying to mediate now, trying to make himself seem reasonable, like we could just have a calm conversation, and everything would magically be okay. I turned to him, my anger flaring up again. "Adults?" I snapped. "You want to talk like adults? You've been sleeping with my wife. What makes you think there's anything left to talk about?" He didn't respond, just looked down at the ground, like he knew there was nothing he could say to fix this. I turned back to Sarah, and for a moment, all the anger faded, replaced by this overwhelming sense of betrayal. I looked at her, really looked at her, and all I could see was the woman I thought I knew, the one I'd loved, trusted, and built my life around. And now standing there, she was just a stranger to me. "Why, Sarah?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Why him? Why do this to us?" She looked up at me, her eyes filled with guilt, but no real answer came. "I don't know," she whispered. It just happened. Things weren't right between us, and I felt lost. Matt was just there. I felt my heart break all over again. That was her excuse? Things weren't right between us. So, instead of talking to me, instead of trying to fix it, she turned to him? How could she throw away everything we had over that? I clenched my fists, trying to hold back the surge of emotions. "You should have talked to me, Sarah," I said quietly, my voice raw with pain. "You should have come to me, not him." Sarah's face crumpled at my words, but I didn't care anymore. Her tears meant nothing now. The weight of her betrayal sat heavy on my chest, and all I could think about was how easily she had chosen him over me. I felt sick, like the room was closing in on me. My whole world had come crashing down, and she stood there, giving me excuses instead of real answers. "I should have," she whispered, her voice shaky. "But I didn't know how to talk to you. Things were just so distant between us. You were always working, and I felt alone. I never meant for it to turn into this." "Distant?" I repeated, my voice thick with disbelief. "That's your excuse? You felt distant, so you just ran to him? How is that supposed to justify anything?" She opened her mouth to speak, but I cut her off, the anger and hurt boiling over again. "You didn't even try to fix us. You didn't say a damn thing about how you felt, Sarah. You could have come to me, told me what was wrong, but no, you went to him." I pointed to Matt, who was still standing there, looking like he wanted to disappear. "Is this what you wanted? To throw everything away for him?" Sarah looked away, unable to meet my eyes, her tears spilling down her cheeks. "I didn't want to throw anything away. I made a mistake, Jason. I don't know how it got this far." Her words stung, but they didn't bring me any comfort. A mistake? That's how she was framing this? 6 months of sneaking around behind my back wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. Over and over again, she had chosen him. I felt the weight of that truth hit me all at once, and my knees nearly buckled under it. Matt, who had been silent for the last few minutes, finally spoke up, trying once again to defuse the situation. "Jason, look, I'm sorry, all right? I know I messed up. We both did. But yelling about it isn't going to fix anything." His calm tone only made my blood boil. How dare he try to act like this was just some casual mistake, like it was something we could just talk out and move on from. I stepped closer to him, my fists clenching again. "You messed up?" I spat. "You think this is just some small mess up? You've been screwing my wife for months, man. You've destroyed my marriage." Matt raised his hands in a gesture of surrender, trying to calm me down. "I'm not saying it's small. I know it's big. I know we hurt you, but this isn't going to solve anything. You deserve to know the truth, but..." "The truth?" I interrupted, my voice rising. "I already know the truth. You're a liar, and she's been lying to me for months. What more do I need to know?" At that moment, I wasn't sure what I was expecting. Maybe an admission of guilt that would make all of this make sense, or some kind of explanation that could justify the pain I was feeling. But all I got was more silence. Neither of them had anything left to say, because there was nothing that could fix what they had done. I turned back to Sarah, my voice quiet but filled with pain. You ruined everything. Do you get that? Everything we built, everything we were working toward, gone. Sarah sobbed, wiping her face with the back of her hand. I never wanted this, Jason. I'm so sorry, but it was too late for apologies. They didn't mean anything now. Everything we had was broken, and there was no coming back from this. The room was drowning in tension, the kind you can feel in your bones, like the air itself had turned heavy with everything unsaid between us. Sarah stood there, tears streaming down her face, but I couldn't bring myself to care anymore. I couldn't feel anything for her except the hollow ache of betrayal. The love I once had for her, the trust, the connection, it was all gone, shattered into pieces that could never be put back together. I could see her desperation now, the way she reached out to me, begging me to stay, to give her one more chance. Jason, please don't go. I made a mistake. I can fix this. We can fix this. Just give me another chance. I shook my head, the weight of her words landing like blows to my chest. Fix this? I repeated, my voice cracking with disbelief. Sarah, this isn't something you can just fix. You cheated on me for half a year. 6 months. You lied to my face every single day. You betrayed me. And now you want to act like we can just go back to how things were? She sobbed harder, shaking her head as if to deny the reality of what she had done. I know it was wrong. I know I hurt you. But I still love you, Jason. I love you. We can go to counseling, we can rebuild, we can get through this. I laughed bitterly, the sound escaping me before I could stop it. Love? You call this love? You were with him, Sarah. You slept with him. And then you came home to me like nothing had happened. How is that love? How do you even say that word after everything? I could see the regret in her eyes, the way she was breaking down in front of me. But it didn't matter anymore. No amount of tears, no apologies, could undo what she had done. Every time I looked at her, I saw the messages, the pictures, the nights she spent with him while I sat at home, clueless. I had been a fool, blind to the truth. And now that I could see it, there was no going back. Jason, I'm begging you, she whispered, her voice trembling. Please don't leave. We've been through so much together. Don't throw it all away because of this. I'll do anything to fix this. I'll quit my job. I'll cut off all contact with Matt. I'll do whatever it takes. Just please, don't walk away from us. Her words pierced me, stirring something deep inside, but not enough to change my mind. I looked at her, really looked at her, and all I saw was a stranger. This wasn't the woman I married. The Sarah I fell in love with would never have done this to me, would never have destroyed everything we built. But here she was standing in front of me, trying to salvage the wreckage of our life together, when all I wanted to do was run. I glanced at Matt, who was still standing there, awkward and silent, clearly wanting to escape this nightmare. He hadn't said much since the confrontation started, and I could see the guilt in his eyes. But it didn't matter. Whatever apology he had to offer, whatever explanation he wanted to give, it wouldn't change anything. Turning back to Sarah, I took a deep breath, trying to hold myself together. You already threw it all away, Sarah. You made that choice the moment you decided to lie to me. The moment you decided to be with him instead of working on us. There's nothing left to fix. I'm done. Her face crumpled at my words, and she collapsed onto the couch, her sobs filling the room. No, Jason, please don't say that. I love you. I made a mistake, but I'm still your wife. I'm still the woman who stood by you all these years. I clenched my fists, the pain in my chest unbearable. You're not my wife anymore. I don't even know who you are. The words were harsher than I intended, but they were true. The woman I thought I knew had disappeared, replaced by someone I couldn't recognize. I trusted you, Sarah. I trusted you with everything. You could have come to me. You could have told me you were unhappy, that things weren't working. We could have fixed it together. But instead you chose him. Her voice cracked as she tried to explain. I was lost. I didn't know what to do. I thought it would just be something to fill the emptiness. But it got out of control. Out of control. I laughed again, shaking my head in disbelief. You were seeing him for 6 months, Sarah. That wasn't out of control. That was a decision you made over and over again. I looked around the room, feeling the weight of all the memories we'd shared in this house, the life we'd built together. It was all tainted now, poisoned by the lies and betrayal. I couldn't stay here anymore. I couldn't be with her, not after everything that had happened. I'm leaving, I said, my voice flat final. I can't do this anymore. She looked up at me, her face pale and tear-streaked. Jason, no. Please don't go. Please, we can fix this. I love you, but it was too late. I had nothing left to give. The woman I thought I knew was gone, replaced by someone who had made choices I could never forgive. I turned toward the door, grabbing my coat and keys, feeling her eyes on me the whole time. You made your choice, Sarah, I said quietly. Now I'm making mine. Without looking back, I walked out the door, leaving everything behind. I stepped outside, the cold night air hitting me like a slap. It was dark, the kind of darkness that presses down on you, suffocating. I stood on the front porch for a moment, staring at the quiet street, trying to wrap my head around what had just happened. My whole life had come crashing down in the span of a few days, and now everything I thought I knew was gone. I heard the door behind me creak open, and Sarah called out in a broken voice. Jason, wait. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I didn't have it in me to face her again. Not after everything she'd said, everything she'd done. I was drained, emotionally wrecked. She came down the steps, her voice pleading. Please, just let's talk about this. You can't leave like this. I need you. Those words stung. I need you. She needed me? After all of this? After 6 months of lying, of sneaking around behind my back, now she decided she needed me? I couldn't hold it in anymore. I turned around, finally facing her. You need me? I said, my voice rising. Now you need me? You had every chance, Sarah. Every chance to talk to me, to tell me you needed me before this, before all of this blew up. And you didn't. You went to him. Tears were streaming down her face, but they didn't affect me anymore. I know, she whispered, her voice trembling. I know I should have come to you. I should have been honest, but I was scared. I was scared of losing you. You already lost me. I shot back, my voice hard. The second you chose to be with him, you lost me. And now you want to stand here and act like we can fix this? There's nothing left to fix, Sarah. We're done. She sobbed harder, clutching her arms around herself as if the cold had finally gotten to her. I could see the desperation in her eyes, the way she was realizing there was no coming back from this. Jason, please. I know I made the worst mistake of my life, but I can't lose you. I love you. I shook my head. No, Sarah. You don't love me. You loved the idea of me, of our life together. But if you really loved me, you wouldn't have done this. You wouldn't have destroyed everything we had. I turned away, heading toward my car, but she ran after me, grabbing my arm. Please don't go, she begged. I can't do this without you. I pulled my arm away, my heart aching from her touch. You should have thought about that before, I said, the cold finality in my voice surprising even me. You already made your choice. She stood there, her breath hitching, her face pale and wrecked with guilt. I'll change. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll end things with Matt. I'll quit my job. I cut her off, my voice firm. It's too late, Sarah. This isn't about Matt. This is about you. You made a choice over and over again. I can't live with that. I can't be with someone who would do this to me. She stepped back, her hands trembling, as if the reality of my words was finally sinking in. Jason, don't do this. Please, don't leave me. For a second, I almost hesitated. A part of me wanted to believe her, to believe that we could somehow work through this, that things could go back to the way they were. But I knew better. There was no going back. The trust was broken, and without trust, there was nothing left. I took one last look at her, the woman I had loved for so many years, now a stranger to me. "Goodbye, Sarah," I said quietly, turning away and heading to my car. As I got in and shut the door, I saw her standing there on the sidewalk, her shoulders shaking with sobs. I felt a pang of regret, a flash of pain for what we once had. But it wasn't enough to make me stay. I started the engine and drove away, the road ahead of me stretching into the night. My mind was swirling with emotions, anger, sadness, betrayal, relief. I didn't know what came next. My whole life had just been torn apart, and I was driving away from the only thing I'd known for the past decade. But I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't stay. I couldn't live with the lies anymore. The farther I drove, the quieter my mind became. I didn't have a plan, didn't know where I was going, but for the first time in days, I felt a sense of clarity. I had made my choice. I had taken the first step away from the pain, the betrayal, the lies. And there was no turning back. As I drove through the empty streets, the silence felt heavy. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see Sarah running after the car. But of course, she wasn't. She was behind me now, part of the past I had just left. My phone buzzed on the seat next to me. I didn't need to check to know it was her. She was probably texting me, begging me to come back, offering more promises and apologies. But I couldn't deal with it right now. I let the phone buzz until it went silent, focusing on the road ahead. I didn't know where I was going, just away from everything that reminded me of her, of the life we'd built that now felt so hollow. I wasn't sure what came next or how I was going to move forward, but I knew I had to keep driving, keep putting distance between myself and the wreckage of what was left of my marriage. For the first time in what felt like forever, I let myself breathe. No more lies, no more pretending, just me and the long road ahead.